Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Brian Giuffra, and welcome back to TBL Scope. Today, we are joined by Kyle Koster. Kyle, you penned one of the best stories on the internet last week. It was all about the Jim Rome SmackDown and the history, 26 years. It was insane getting to know some of these people, these massive personalities who have created their own kind of little world within the Jim Rome world. I'd love to just hear from you. What was it like getting into that world?
It was really interesting. There's so many disparate personalities, and this event every single year, the Smack Up, it's the best. It's the Super Bowl of calls, as they would say, not just in their show, but for entire sports radio. And it's basically the culmination of all the beefs, of the biggest professional wrestling event of the year in a way. They come together and they try to craft the best phone call, which is over time has gone more and more to burning on each other as it used to be to cracking back against an athlete or someone. So it was a really interesting story, speaking to about a dozen people who have made their legacy calling in, and a lot of people who have screened the calls talking about the show and how the caller's ethos really fits in with the show and what Jim Rome meant to build at the very beginning, which he succeeded in doing. And I think that the biggest takeaway for me, besides the fact that I could never be a caller, I could never call in and go for 3.5, 4 minutes straight of just nothing on the other line and putting together these unbelievable phone calls, because if you stumble for a minute, you're done. And sometimes I stumble, and that's okay. And then they said that it's okay to be just a caller. It takes a special breed to do it. But the biggest thing that I learned was that getting value added from a caller for a sports radio show or any radio show at this point has become so difficult. And you see most of the big shows now don't even take calls. Or if they do, they are so deferential to the callers where they'll say, "Thank you so much for calling. Thanks for listening to the show." They'll take the same caller every single day to not add anything, just to talk about how the Yankees bullpen stinks and here's the way to fix it, and that's really the way to look at sports radio and in sports TV shows in a lot of ways is you're taking the ball out of your quarterback's hand, your best player's hand when you send it over to the callers. So there needs to be something different. And what these callers can bring is these all different angles of the way they're going to approach things. They are lauded and they're rewarded for being as creative as possible. So you get kind of the best of the best, and then also you get people who want to crack into that echelon who fail miserably, and then it's turned around for content for the show, because there's nothing better when something crashes and burns. So really cool to get to know how all these people approach this high wire act, which is tough to get right but can be fixed when it goes wrong in the form of content.
It was really interesting to read the entire story, and I read it twice, not only to edit, but then just once to kind of really soak it in. And I agree with you. You notice how different what they're trying to do is from what you hear when callers, do that. I'm in New York, so when you hear the callers nowadays, it's just kind of like they're doing it just to do it. They're not doing it to add anything. And these people really do add substance to the to the show. I'd love to know who your favorite character was. I shouldn't say is. My favorite was definitely JT the Brick. JT the Brick, not only because he's the New York guy, but interesting story that he was a 6-figure job 26 years ago on Wall Street, and he leaves that to become like a radio host, which I was like, that's just crazy for this area to make that kind of switch. It's worked out for him, but I'd love to know who your favorite character is.
I think my favorite character was Lef in Laguna. He actually ended up winning it on Friday. His call was really interesting. He talked to me about how he spends the entire year coming up with material and really focuses it and hones it. And it was really interesting to hear how the stuff he told me he was working on and seeing his process really played out. And he was big on being he was big on improv. He was big on saying yes and. He was talking about how he needs to respond to what the previous caller said. So you could see that of all the stuff that he had planned, how much he rewrote to include things, which I must say was really wild when a lot of it included the stuff that I had written and the quotes that I had got from the other clones. So it was a surreal, seeing the fourth wall being knocked down by using material that you know that you provided, and people are using that for their smack off call, the biggest one of the year, which was really fascinating. Yeah, JT the Brick has the best story though. He won the inaugural smack off in 1995, and he left a good job at Merrill Lynch, and he told me he had no inclinations of doing it. And he said that he didn't really want to do it. He only called because he wanted to disagree with Rome, and he wanted to talk New York sports. And one thing led to another, and he got out of it. And he told me he took a job for like $27,000. He initially had to pay for his own time to get on the air, because that's something that can happen. You can pay to rent the airspace, basically, like overnight. He told me that he did, I think, in LA. And now, he Fox Sports Radio. He's 20-year career, wrote a book. Like, he told me all the things that changed just because he won the smack off. And that was kind of a common theme of these callers who have become legends on the show. They talk about making that inaugural call, and they talk about how hard it is to break in, and how many of them almost didn't call back, but only did because their name got brought up again. And it's like this weird thing where you're looking at this like divergent sliding doors history of these people who have become outside characters, legends, like a Hall of Fame Mount Rushmore, Jim Rome stuff. And like, yeah, I never really thought about calling in a second time. Or if Jim Rome hadn't said, hey, that was a great call, my confidence wouldn't have been such that I needed to make a secondary phone call. So all these things operating on like razor thin margins was really cool.
And it was also cool that they've created their own little community. I know that like these specific people all seem to be like friendly off the thing. They were like, we're competitors on the court, but then when we get off it, we just talk about, it. That was really interesting to me. The other thing that was interesting to me was like the Jason Stewarts and Kyle Brandits of the world, who were like doing, the screening and trying to find these good callers, and the callers would wait for like 3 hours before they were let on. What was a story that you left out that we didn't get, that either one of the producers or one of the callers, like just sitting there on hold for 3 hours, said to you?
I think it would be, I told the one that the guy said left when he was crafting his phone calls in this hotel, and he got kicked out. There was a lot of stuff that I heard that I didn't include because it was redundant. I tried to use like the best anecdotes, but a lot of times the thing I did there is kind of like the oral history type thing, is I wouldn't put two quotes that said the same thing. So I could tell you a lot of people's what they said that I didn't include for redundancy's sake was like an A or an F. A C is the worst thing. So many people were telling me about how they treated it as professional wrestling. And I think so many people who worked on the show, some behind the scenes on the show, it goes to reason that people in sports media have to work really hard. But I think you have to work particularly hard on this show. I got the sense that Rome is a very demanding boss, which makes sense because look at the show that he's created, right? He's got high standards for himself, and certainly not afraid to dish it out and also take it. So I think that that's kind of like a top-down structure. You start at the very top, and then the people who work under him feel the same way and kind of model their behavior after him. And there's a really high bar to clear. And then the callers also think that they have to break through and do it, and they also have to do it with attitude. So I think one of the questions that I asked so many people, actually, I'll give you this. I asked a lot of people, can you be a nice guy and be an elite Jim Rome caller? And they overwhelmingly said yes. There were a few people that I got the sense that like they had a real edge to them. And when you talk to all these people, you can tell over the course of like a 40-minute phone call, like, all right, what's their personality? Some of these people has a real edge to them. But a lot were like very mild-mannered. And then when you follow them after the piece went out, some of the stuff that they quote tweeted or said about the other competitors, they really were kind of softies in there. But they're able to channel these burns so well on air and almost become a totally different persona, a la wrestling, like the theme. Let's shift over to something that you wrote, and it was ranking the prospects of the NFL quarterbacks on their broadcasting potential. And you ranked all the starters 1 through 32 with some help from our good friend Liam. Shout out Liam. Thanks for doing the site while we're doing this. I'm just going to say number 1 right now, Drew Brees. Let's check the date on that. Is that still the case? I know there was a little bit dust up there, but Drew Brees obviously has gone to NBC. Who were your other top competitors, your top prospects for stepping from under center into the broadcast booth in some time down the road?
Yeah, so Liam and I created that list right the day before the whole Drew Brees controversy started, and I said to Liam, well, let's see, because we have a week until we're publishing this anyway. Let's see how he handles it, and I think he handled it really well, all things considered. And I don't think that what happened is going to impact his ability to go into the booth. So I thought he was a clear number 1. I mean, the guy already has a contract reportedly with NBC. That's a big contract. And I think the cool thing about Drew Brees, to me at least, is that he could be either in the booth or in the studio. And like, I could see him being like a Terry Bradshaw type person who has like this 40-year career as a studio analyst that people just love. He's just got that, he's just got that kind of like Midwestern persona that people gravitate towards. He's not too aggressive. Everybody can kind of get behind him. So there really wasn't a debate at number 1. Phillip Rivers, I was, there was some talk like, oh, well, because he's got like a little bit more of a unique story, like, could he be great in the booth? He wound up being number 2. I thought the fun argument was around 3 and 4. We had Ryan Fitzpatrick and Gardner Minshew. That was a Liam push. Liam really wanted Minshew up there, and he gave me a really strong argument about the fact of marketing. And, he's just like he's just got like this oversized personality that really does work well, again, in whether it's a booth or an analyst role. When we went through them all, we said, okay, well, listen, some people might be good for the booth. Some people might be good as an analyst role. Some people might be good for college, but no matter what, you just have to rank them based on how good they would be for that role, the role that we're envisioning them for. Obviously, broadcasters might envision Gardner Minshew in a very different role, like a Kenny Mayne or something like that. But all the same, I think his potential to be something cool right now, and again, we're also basing this off of right now, is there. I mean, literally, if ESPN hired Gardner Minshew and he went around giving out mustaches like they did last year, that's a segment. That's a good segment that people would read. Some of the interesting questions for me were, Liam and I argued over these quarterbacks who, aren't going into the broadcast booth, right? So how do you rank a Tom Brady? The reality is that Tom Brady, if he wanted to do broadcast, would be number 1 on this list. I pushed him down to number 6 because he's not going to do it. It was the same argument with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is number 8 on this list. If Aaron Rodgers wanted to get into broadcast around the Green Bay Packers, he'd be the number 1 guy. So, that was kind of like the interesting debate, where it's like, what about like some of these guys who are like too big? And then some of these guys who are like totally unknown. Our number 32 spot was for Liam's favorite team, Jarrett Stidham. Because what do you know about the guy? Number 1, he hasn't proven anything as a quarterback. Number 2, you haven't really heard him talk because he was backing up Tom Brady last year. It's totally unknown. So, that was like the interesting thing, is as you start to get lower, what are you really ranking against? Is it not only the fact that they're not charismatic like a Jared Goff? And again, that's not a knock on Jared Goff. I've seen his interviews. He just doesn't come across as a person who I'm like, I need to watch this guy talk for 10 minutes about football. So, it was an interesting debate. We had a lot of back and forth. We had an initial list. That list got moved around a lot. Then, even like within the last couple of days of it, as we were writing out some of the things, I was like, well, here's a better point that I didn't realize I could make for a Teddy Bridgewater. Like a Teddy Bridgewater, he could go out and he could be your injury guy. Now, I'm not trying to typecast Teddy Bridgewater that all anybody can talk about is his injury, but like, that's actually interesting because he's dealt with it, right? So like, you could send him out as an on-site reporter once COVID goes away, and he's interviewing these people going through these devastating injuries. And quite frankly, I think that's really interesting. I think those types of human interest stories actually really are what I gravitate to, at least. So like, Teddy Bridgewater's, right in that middle part, and the reason why he was much lower originally, but then I was writing the little blurb up about it, and I was like, this actually would make a lot of sense for him. So we had a lot of back and forth throughout it. What did you think anything was wrong? Did we make a big mistake? Was there a person out there that you were like, he should have been higher or they should have been lower?
No, I was looking at this, and I think that I got a lot of like value picks for you right here. Like, I love Patrick Mahomes at 9. I think Patrick Mahomes, when it's all said and done, is going to be the face of the NFL. You see he's, even with the activism and the way he's speaking right now, he's going to be fantastic. I also think he's going to be a several-time Super Bowl winner. I think that that's one guy to watch for. I another guy at 11 too. I just give you my own thoughts on quarterbacks when it comes to what networks are looking for. Number 11, Kirk Cousins, my close personal friend and neighbor. I think that he could be fantastic at it. And more than that, he's the exact type person that the networks love. They love the guy who has values, usually like pretty religious, pretty safe, stuff like that. But I think that he's like a very likable, nice guy, a very pleasant guy, like the exact guy that so many people would hope their like daughters bring home from college one year. So I think that like he's a real value. And again, to go back to like what you said about Drew Brees, what you said about Philip Rivers, is I want to point out this thing that I have been so interested in seeing, and when it comes to broadcasters in recent years. The number one thing that a quarterback has to have, and you can go up and down the board, almost every single quarterback that's been there, some sort of resonance and connection with the South. It's absolutely uncanny. Tony Romo played in Dallas. Terry Bradshaw. Name anyone that you want. Drew Brees. Like, who else is up there? Peyton Manning. Like, all these SEC, Tennessee connections. Philip Rivers, like, played at NC State. Like, there's this resonance that really has to be there. And I think that the top guys are always going to be there. And I don't think that ever changes. So it's really interesting. I love the list. I thought it was cool. I thought some of the arguments were really interesting. A lot of guys at the bottom, I felt bad for them, but it's also like you just don't know that much about them. One thing to throw a wrinkle into all this, look at some of the top broadcasters who are quarterbacks who have gone into it. Backups, Dan Orlovsky, Brian Griese. So there's a very good potential that the biggest broadcaster of all comes from a backup or an also-ran or someone you would never think of. So it's pretty crazy to look at this. This list was heavy on accomplishments, which I thought is fantastic and kind of the only fair way to do it. But also, like, in the real world, it could be someone who is just this brainiac or whatever, just totally clicks and gets it. So I really look forward to you guys diving into the third string list sometime in the next few months when we don't have football.
So, Kyle, to your point, I like Dan Orlovsky. I like Brian Griese. They both had really solid careers. They both had starting experience. Griese a little bit more of a high than Orlovsky. And you even look at like the Trent Dilfers of the world. He wins the Super Bowl, but he had a very much journeyman career as well. And I'm not saying that those guys can't make it, but the one thing I would say is I don't think, to me at least, that they have that star power that really moves the needle. And that's what we were really looking for, especially with those top rankings. It's the reason I put Ryan Fitzpatrick at number 3. I think he has that star potential, not only for the reasons that you mentioned in terms of what makes some of these other broadcasters good, but also he's just got that memorable look with the bushy beard and the big hair. So, we were looking for people who tried to fit both of them. As you said, we also felt it was hard near the end. Like, how do you rank one person who you don't really know that much about to another? It really came down to that like star potential and who we thought would really pop on screen. But speaking of popping on screen, we appreciate you guys watching TBL Scope. For Kyle Koster, this is Brian Giuffra, and we will see you next week.